everyone is in agreement that the deaths of innocents in that hospital in Gaza never should have happened. But we are taking the necessary time to look carefully at everything, and rapidly, of course, before we draw any final conclusions about what happened. We are taking this extremely seriously because of all the intensity with which people are living this horrific loss of life.
Now, initial reports from Gazan authorities did blame Israel, but both Israel and the U.S. say their intelligence point to a rocket fired by a Palestinian fighter, the target originally being Israel, but it ended up hitting the hospital. Well, with more, we're now joined by our political panel. Susan Smith is principal with Blue Sky Strategy Group. Tim Powers is chairman of Summa Strategies. And Anne McGrath, the national director for the NDP. Hello to the three of you.
Hey, Michael.
Listen, it's probably worthwhile to play what we heard from the Prime Minister earlier this week to start our discussion. And then we'll do a bit of a compare and contrast, if you will. But let's play again Justin Trudeau from earlier in the week.
The news coming out of Gaza is horrific and absolutely unacceptable. International humanitarian and international law needs to be respected in this and in all cases. There are rules around wars, and it's not acceptable to hit
Is the hospital bomb?
Now, again, that was the Prime Minister from a few days ago. That comment having some people accusing the Prime Minister of blaming Israel. You know, I'm wondering, what does the incident say to you about the kind of tightrope that Justin Trudeau and really Canada is walking right now? Susan, I'll get you to start us out.
Yeah, I think the world is walking a tightrope. We're dealing with a terrorist organization, Hamas. We're dealing with a country, Israel, that's defending itself. We're dealing with an internet full of misinformation. We're dealing with health authorities in Gaza that are run by Hamas. So I think the Prime Minister's statement today at the CARICOM conference was very important and builds on the statement earlier this week. Canada, like its allies, the UK is doing the same thing, is carefully looking at the evidence to make sure that we have all the right information. But regardless, any kinds of missiles landing on hospitals is wrong. It's against the rule of law. So that's a rule of law and international law. That's what's the terrible thing in this instance. And so I think the Prime Minister is walking the line that Canada has to walk on that, and that Canadians expect him to walk, which is gather all the evidence and then make a comment on either side. But the true and right comment is that no rockets, no missiles should land on hospitals. Hospitals are safe places, and that's part of international law.
Mm-hmm. And Tim, what do you say? Because, you know, Susan's saying that the Prime Minister is building on what he said of a few days ago, but of course that initial comment did get him into trouble in certain circles.
He started right. Look, I think he and every other political leader got it right on how this all started a couple of weeks ago with Hamas's terror attack. I don't think he's walking a tightrope. I hope and I'll give him the benefit of the doubt, I hope he's not being influenced too much by domestic politics, because as Canada gathers information, you have to wonder where they're going to gather it from. Likely they're going to gather it from the Five Eyes, which means they will be seeing that American intelligence and British intelligence and other intelligence. I don't think we have the assets on the ground to gather our own intelligence. So I think, you know, there's probably enough evidence so far, but maybe he just wants to wait further. I don't think he can wait too long. He needs to tuck in with the U.S. and Israel here. The other point I'd make, Michael, around this as well is that, you know, Susan's bang on international law, but I think it's a bit of a hollow point when you're dealing with terrorist organizations like Hamas and other apparent actors in Israel and in Gaza who are not nation states, who don't give a damn about international law. And probably could care less, based on information that we've seen, about where they store weapons. Long suggested by many credible news sources that Hamas in particular uses hospitals and other places where the public gathers and uses them as a human shield. So I think we have to be careful as Canadians, and as the Canadian Prime Minister as well, to fall into propaganda traps that come out during terrible wars like this.
The whole fog of war issue. And what do you have to say?
Yeah, I mean, there's that old saying that the first casualty of war is the truth. And I think that that's going to be probably more the case in this particular situation than even previous ones. There is a massive amount of misinformation and disinformation out there, and many of the social media sources are not reliable. I mean, the space formerly known as Twitter is absolutely impossible to trust these days for anything. And in all of that barrage of misinformation and disinformation, political leaders everywhere in Canada and everywhere else are being asked to and are expected to comment very quickly on things that may or may not be fully verified. So I think it is a tricky situation. I think that as we move along, we will see that there will be unfortunately, more circumstances like this where it's not immediately obvious what the truth is about something, what the information is, what the intelligence is. And, I think that one of the things that Canada can do and other, good actors in all of this need to be doing is to be calling for things like the humanitarian corridor, humanitarian assistance, a ceasefire, adherence to international law, prosecution of war crimes. That will be, I'm sure, a big feature of this as well. So I think that for political leaders, it's going to be really important to verify their information, but that is hard to do right now. For instance, on the hospital bombing, some of the sources were places like Associated Press, which is generally a credible, accepted to be a credible source of news. But I think it's going to be hard as we move forward. We're going to be getting a lot of reports that may just be innuendo, rumors, misinformation, disinformation.
Yeah, well, we'll certainly, as you say, so many avenues and venues from which people are getting information. Which one is correct, which one is accurate, is something that people need to put their critical thought to. But I do wonder at this point, some 2 weeks after the initial attack on Israel, the humanitarian crisis that we're now seeing in Gaza, what more do you think the government can be doing, should be doing? Susan?
Yeah, look, I mean, it's the terrorist attack on Israel was October 7th. 12 days later, there's a body count in the thousands on both sides of that Gaza border, of that Israeli border. And that's a very tragic and terrible thing to happen. Canada's gotten its citizens, the citizens who want to come out of Israel through the flights. They've managed to get that in place, to get people who choose to come out. The trickier situation is getting those Canadians who wish to come out of Gaza out, because there has been no land border open that is safe for people to cross. So they're working to get humanitarian aid in and to get Canadians out. There was a bus, at least, that left Ramallah and the West Bank for Canadians who wanted to get onto that. So there's a couple of things. There are Canadian hostages that are people that are believed to be Canadian hostages. There's humanitarian aid, food, medicine, water that needs to get in a safe way to civilians, that Canada can do that. And Canada can work as a middle power to try and just, do its best to be the person who goes between countries, right? We have lots of allies around the world and in that part of the world, and we can contribute through our Five Eyes and our diaspora network to trying to get Canadians out safely and make sure that the terrorist situation isn't exacerbated in any way.
Tim?
I think adding to what Susan said, I think where we do have influence, because we can have a debate, it's not the time for it right now, about whether our influence around the world is waning or not. And you see the U.S. fully engaged. British Prime Minister is there today, and I think those are the right things. But I think where we do have influence that isn't questionable is in some of the larger international organizations, the Red Cross and others, that could play a very helpful role here. Canada does have experience managing disaster, less so war, Haiti and other places. Perhaps we can lend that expertise and assistance there, which may be a more practical thing for us to do, along with some of the things Susan has talked about.
And to you.
Well, I think that there's a real urgency in getting that humanitarian assistance and humanitarian corridor and ceasefire underway. Right now, there are, as Susan's right, the Canadian government was able to get Canadians who wanted to leave Israel to get them out. But this tricky situation is the Canadians that are in Gaza, and there is no way out. So it looks now, at least from what I've heard, that there are trucks going to be allowed in, or to get in with some water and fuel and food finally, which is it's unbelievable to me that people have been going without for this long. But there still doesn't appear to be a way out, and I think that's got to be a focus of the pressure right now, is to make sure that people can leave, and for the Canadian government to be very focused on making sure that Canadians that are trapped there can leave. There's all the effort that has to be put into the freeing of the hostages for sure, but there are hundreds of Canadians in Gaza that need to find a way out.
Yeah. Listen, of course, we're going to keep tracking the story long from being over. But before you go, I did want to get your thoughts on something that happened in the House on Wednesday. I'm quickly running out of time, so I'm going to ask you to quickly get your response. But for people who don't know, the Speaker did delay the usual start time of question period to make a statement on decorum, something that the opposition Conservatives did not take kindly to. Take a listen.
The question period will follow immediately after this statement.
Question period.
The government is here to serve Parliament, not the other way around. We ask that you allow us to proceed with question period.
The Speaker has the choice as to when to start question period.
You are a servant of the House. You should follow the standing order.
I'm going to continue with this statement. I think it's important for all members to understand this.
Okay, again, quickly, but was Greg Fergus right to do what he did, or should he have found a different time to do what he did? Susan, with you first.
Good for Greg Fergus. People have commented for years at the absolute deterioration of decorum in the House of Commons, and I think the response and what the clips didn't capture is the hooting, hollering, and yelping from the opposition benches. That is precisely what Speaker Fergus was seeking to address. People have been grandstanding even more than normal in question period, and he basically was laying down the rules, saying, or reminding people what the rules are, saying, we're not going to tolerate this. We need to bring respect and decorum back to the House of Commons. So good on Speaker Fergus.
Okay, Tim?
Well, breaking news, Michael. I was in Newfoundland and Labrador yesterday. Nobody gave a damn about this story because it's question period, which perhaps is the bigger story here. I'd take a slightly different approach. I think what Greg is trying to do is important, and I think he has the right to do it. But he may have wanted in this case, and I don't know because, as I say, it wasn't a big story out where I was, may have wanted to condition the audience that he was going to do this, maybe talk to the House leaders. He doesn't have to, but I think he could have made it less acrimonious and perhaps more beneficial in that regard. But the initiative is worth taking. I will give him that.
Mm-hmm. And your thoughts on it?
The question period gets worse and worse every year, and it is probably it's never been as bad as it has been lately. And for the decades that I have been around here, every time there's a speaker election, the main thing that is asked of the candidates that are running for speaker is what they're going to do about decorum. So it's one of those situations where everybody wants something to happen, but there are roadblocks to actually having more civility in the House. So I think Tim is right. There might have been a way to negotiate with, or at least inform or give a heads up to the parties, to the caucuses that this was going to happen. But what I want to see is I want to see what is actually going to be done to make sure that question period is not an embarrassment and is actually something where you can hold the government to account, where you don't have to be ashamed to bring school children in to watch our Parliament in action, and where people can finish their sentences and don't get shouted out the way that has been the way it's been happening, at least lately. and probably for quite a long time.
Yeah, isn't that the litmus
Now,
test?
Michael, you got to call out misinformation here quickly.
Okay.
Anne said she's been here for decades. She's only 25. How is that possible?
We will get our researchers on it, Tim, and we're going to get back to you as soon as we have the answer.
Don't have them research how long I've been here.
You and I both. Listen, Susan, Tim, Anne, thank you for this. Take care.
Thank you.
Thank you.